I didn't recognize him. That was the part that rattled me most. More than the sleek presentation deck with my stolen code, more than the fact that he called it proprietary in-house tech. I stood there, 4 rows back at the Silicon Valley Tech Summit, watching Brandon, the same man who once spilled kombucha on my keyboard and told me to chill out, parade my algorithm like a show pony, and when our eyes met, there wasn't even a flicker of guilt, just that same polished smirk, that VC-honed charm he wore like a second skin. He didn't know me. I stood there, invisible in my own legacy, feeling like a ghost watching someone else live my life. He clicked to slide 6, my slide 6, and I felt my throat close. Not because of the theft. That part was old news. What made my stomach knot was the line of code frozen on the screen behind him. Line 208, my signature buried in a log comment. MLV2, optimization after Phoenix data crash AMR. Those initials? Mine. I had left them there years ago, in a moment of dumb pride, like carving your name into a tree you don't own. He hadn't scrubbed it. He hadn't even noticed. Or maybe he had. And that's what truly broke me. Rewind 5 years. They hired me out of a coding marathon I didn't even want to attend. I was 24, brilliant, and utterly naive. Their pitch was syrupy. Disruption, diversity. We're a family here. What they meant was, we need a girl genius to polish our image, underpay her, and work her until she forgets her own name. And I did. I worked like I was building heaven's back end, 14-hour days, weekends blurred into weekday nights. But I loved the problem. Distributed efficiency in hybrid cloud environments. I had something that scaled better than anything on the market. I tested it, proved it, deployed it. The first time I ran it on our staging servers and watched latency drop by 37%, I actually cried. They named the product Zephyr, like it came from the gods, not from me sobbing over server logs with coffee-stained hoodies and blistered fingers. They made millions. I got stock options that matured into dust. At first, I stayed quiet. I told myself I was building clout, that eventually the meritocracy would catch up. But meritocracy, I learned, is Latin for men taking credit while you debug their garbage. The tipping point wasn't dramatic, it was a laugh. 6 months ago, I walked into Brandon's glass office and asked for a raise, not even equity, just acknowledgement. Just numbers that matched what he was making from my code. He leaned back, actually leaned back, like he was settling in for a TED Talk, then laughed like I just offered to babysit his ego for free. Not really the negotiating type, Melissa, he said. You're technical. That's your lane. I remember the taste in my mouth then, metal and dust, like I'd swallowed the bones of my younger self. And that's when something shifted. I didn't rage. I didn't cry. I smiled, the quiet, terrifying kind of smile people mistake for surrender. And I walked out of his office, not to quit, not yet. I had something better in mind, because what Brandon didn't know, I still owned the patent, not the company, me. And that, dear Brandon, is where the avalanche begins. The patent was my ace, tucked so deep in my sleeve it might as well have been tattooed on my spine. See, 5 years ago, during the early prototype stage, I'd filed it myself, quietly, under my maiden name, with just enough abstraction in the language to keep it off their radar, and just enough legal ambiguity to keep it mine. I remember the lawyer, Harold, a semi-retired pit bull from Santa Clara who smelled like paper and bourbon, looking me dead in the eyes and saying, "This claw right here, this is your Kevlar vest." I paid him in monthly installments and lived off ramen for half a year, worth every sodium-laced bite. The company never questioned it because they never read. They were too busy branding, fundraising, grifting. By the time they slapped my algorithm into Zephyr, they were treating it like air, necessary, invisible, totally taken for granted. But now it was the product, their core infrastructure, their entire valuation, and I held the trigger. But I didn't pull it. Not yet. First, I played nice. I showed up, did my job, pretended the laugh hadn't fractured something irreversible in me. Meanwhile, I started auditing the codebase, line by line. I kept a private repo mirror of production, time-stamped and annotated every instance where my algorithm was deployed, modified, extended, every place they'd built on top of my foundation like squatters on stolen land. Then came phase 2, the Trojan horse. I introduced a debug module, pitched it as an internal monitoring tool, track load balancing in real time, identify bottlenecks, optimize cluster behavior. It sounded so harmless. The team cheered. Brandon, in his infinite idiocy, called me a godsend, shipped it with the latest product update without reading the architecture notes. Inside that module, a heartbeat. Every time the code executed, it pinged my private server with anonymized usage metrics. Legally, it wasn't even espionage. It was telemetry. And thanks to that heartbeat, I knew exactly when, where, and how often my algorithm was being used, which by late April was everywhere. By then, I had my dossier, 57 pages, time logs, execution footprints, comparative benchmarks, screenshots of internal dashboards, all signed, sealed, and ready for delivery to the one person Brandon feared more than God, Ethan Cho, founder, billionaire CEO of their biggest competitor. We'd met once, years ago, at a Women in Tech gala. I'd spilled wine on his sleeve and muttered something self-deprecating about crash logs. He laughed, not at me, but with me, then handed me his card. Call me when they forget who built the engine. I'd kept it, and on the first Thursday in May, I did. His assistant answered. He's in Zurich, I said. Tell him it's Melissa Hayes. Tell him I have something he'll want to see before their Series E. Silence, then. Hold, please. When Ethan picked up, he didn't say hello, just, how bad did they screw you? I sent him the dossier in 3 encrypted parts. He read it by sunrise. By Monday, I was on a plane to Geneva. By Wednesday, we had a deal. By Friday, his legal team filed the transfer paperwork. And just like that, the patent was no longer mine. It belonged to Cloudbreak Technologies, Brandon's direct competitor. And I sat back, waiting for the sky to fall. It started with a flicker, a low-severity bug report from one of their enterprise clients. Load distribution anomaly during peak cycle. Minor, routine. Their engineers flagged it for next sprint. I smiled because that anomaly, that was just the echo, the tremor before the quake. See, when Ethan acquired the patent, he didn't just sit on it, he weaponized it, quietly, surgically. First, his lawyers sent a cease and desist, 30 pages of icy precision, time-stamped code lineage, patent timestamps, usage trails, and damages. Brandon got it Monday morning. I know because Brett, the only halfway decent engineer left on their back-end team, texted me a screenshot of Brandon pacing in front of the whiteboard like a zoo animal. He'd drawn a triangle labeled risk and underlined it 7 times. By noon, the CTO's assistant was calling emergency meetings like confetti. By 2:00 p.m., their VP of legal had resigned. But I wasn't watching from the sidelines. I was already inside. 2 weeks before I sold the patent, I'd been transferred to a support division, internal politics, something resource allocation. Brandon thought he was punishing me. What he'd actually done was give me low-profile access to infrastructure no one monitored. I cloned their internal wiki. I downloaded every single Jira ticket, Confluence doc, Slack archive I could get my hands on, quietly, precisely, because I knew what was coming next. They'd lie. They'd gaslight. They'd say it was all convergent innovation or incidental overlap. Try to rewrite history while standing on the ashes of my work. But I had receipts. So when Brandon marched into our Thursday all-hands and said, "There's been a misunderstanding regarding some IP concerns," I almost choked on my sparkling water. He called it a misunderstanding, like he hadn't built an entire product suite on tech he didn't own. The engineers were nervous. One even asked, "Are we refactoring the Zephyr stack?" Brandon waved him off. "Legal's handling it. Nothing changes for now." Except everything was changing. Cloudbreak had gone public. Their new flagship platform, Cloudbreak AI, TM, trademarked, built on my algorithm, refined, modernized, supercharged with their GPU layer. And the best part? Every major client Zephyr had ever lured with my back-end magic, they saw the patent news, they saw the lawsuits, they smelled blood. By the following Monday, 5 contracts had pulled out of Zephyr, who jumped ship to Cloudbreak. One went nuclear on Twitter. Brandon, meanwhile, was trying to patch a sinking ship with duct tape made of delusion. He ordered the engineers to rewrite core logic, not realizing that even rewriting it would still violate the patent unless they reimagined the architecture from the ground up, which would take, about 18 months they didn't have. He summoned me to his office, finally. I walked in like a ghost he didn't believe in. His eyes were red. He looked smaller. "Melissa," he started. "Not Mandy, not Kiddo, just Melissa. The name you use when you're trying to remember who you're speaking to." "I need your help," he said. I sat down, crossed my legs, let the silence breathe. Then I said, "Oh, Brandon, I think you're confusing me with someone who owes you something." He blinked, like maybe he'd hallucinated that tone or that spine. "This company," he started, "ran on stolen work for 5 years. I cut in. "You built an empire on a lie, and now you want me to what? Help glue the bones back together? I can get you a seat at the table. Equity. Senior architect. You name it." I leaned forward, almost gently. "You already had me, and you pissed it away for a bonus and a feature in Fast Company." His jaw clenched. "So you're just going to let it all burn?" And I swear I almost laughed. "Because let it burn?" "No, Brandon, I lit the match." First layoffs hit Friday. 22 engineers, half the DevOps team. A guy named Leon, who brought his golden retriever to work every Thursday and cried quietly into its fur after Brandon made him announce the rollback of Project Hydra, the last thing the company was banking on to salvage what was left of their roadmap. I watched from the kitchen, sipping burnt coffee. Nobody looked at me, not out of malice, but out of that quiet, primal instinct you develop around wild animals and ticking bombs. I had become a cautionary tale with legs. I wasn't fired, not yet, because Brandon wasn't done trying to wring me out. The day after the layoffs, I got a calendar invite. No subject, no agenda, just 3:00 p.m. his office. I showed up 10 minutes early and stood in the hallway just long enough to hear the end of his call. "She's bluffing," he said. "She wouldn't nuke 5 years of her own work. There's too much ego there." "Oh, Brandon, you always did mistake ego for principle." When he let me in, the lights were dim. No more smile, no more corporate theater. Just a man who'd finally realized the future had teeth. "Melissa," he said, "like we were allies, we're prepared to offer you a counter." I let him talk. An obscene salary, C-title, buyout clause, performance equity, NDA so thick you could drown a priest in it, and finally, a non-compete clause that spanned continents. I flipped the packet open and turned to the last page, where the signature line waited like a noose. "You want me to disappear?" I said. "No," he lied. "We want to move forward." "You know what's funny?" I asked, standing up. "You still don't get it." "Then why?" I leaned in, close enough to smell the desperation behind his cologne. "Because you laughed." I walked out, left the offer packet on the table like a corpse. He didn't follow. That night, Cloudbreak made the final move. They didn't sue for damages. They didn't negotiate a settlement. They published the story, a full-page feature in TechCrunch, how Cloudbreak acquired a revolutionary patent and the engineer who was erased. Front cover. Me, not smiling, arms crossed, standing in front of a whiteboard filled with the same load balancing equations I once drew for a man who barely understood recursion. They didn't use makeup. They didn't touch up the lines under my eyes. They left the scar from the curling iron I'd gotten in year 2 of the grind. They made me real. Zephyr stock tanked 18% by morning. Investors started calling emergency board meetings. A whistleblower from inside legal leaked an email thread showing Brandon knew the patent ownership was in question and deployed the algorithm anyway. The SEC opened an inquiry. By noon, Brandon was on personal leave. By evening, his LinkedIn said, "Open to work." And yet, through all of it, the tsunami I had summoned, I didn't feel triumph. Not exactly. I felt clean, like I had finally vacuumed out 5 years of gaslighting, humiliation, invisible labor with one glorious inhale of oxygen no one could ration anymore. But I wasn't done, because there was still one person left to deal with. The woman behind the curtain, the one who greenlit everything Brandon did, the CEO, Margaret Dane. She hadn't said a word since this all started, but she was watching. And now I was coming for her. Margaret Dane never raised her voice. She didn't need to. She could peel flesh with tone alone. One of those corporate witches who wore silence like armor and filed her fingernails with quarterly projections. If Brandon was a frat boy with a god complex, Margaret was the quiet god that actually ran the universe. People joked she had a neural interface to Bloomberg. Nobody had ever seen her eat. She hired Brandon, defended him, and once referred to me in a board meeting as one of our junior algorithmic specialists, this years after I'd built the architecture that floated their entire cloud division. So when I walked into the boardroom, uninvited, I wasn't expecting an audience, just a queen on her collapsing throne. She was exactly as I remembered. Slate gray suit, sharp lipstick, no jewelry except a wedding band that looked like it cost more than my first car. Her assistant tried to intercept me. Margaret raised one hand and said, "Let her in." No smile, no welcome, just, "I assume this is about the fire you started." I sat across from her and said nothing. Let the weight sit. Let her feel it. "You've made your point," she said after a long pause. Brandon was reckless. "The board agrees. We're cleaning house." "Cleaning house won't fix the foundation," I said. "You built your empire on a stolen engine." She didn't flinch. "You licensed it. Your contract was never valid. Your legal team skipped due diligence, and now it's cloud breaks." Margaret's jaw twitched once, a microfracture in the ice. "We can still salvage the company?" she said. "You've made your power play. What's the ask?" "The ask," I said, "is a confession." That got her. One blink, slow. "You want blood? I want truth." She looked at me the way a lioness might study a wounded gazelle, wondering why it's charging her. "You're playing with fire, Melissa. Companies don't collapse because of truth. They collapse because of stories. And right now, you're writing one." She leaned forward, tone softer, more venomous. "If I release a statement naming you as the source of the patent, publicly acknowledging you were the architect, do you walk away?" I stared at her, then said, "No." Her brow lifted. "Because you still don't get it," I said. "This isn't about credit, it's about rot. I worked here for 5 years, and none of you once thought to protect the thing keeping your lights on. You're emotional. You're extinct." Silence. Then Margaret did something I didn't expect. She smiled. "I underestimated you." I stood. Everyone did. As I turned to leave, she said, "Be careful, Melissa. You're not the only one with a long memory." I paused at the door, then gave her the one line I'd been saving since the day Brandon laughed. "So remember this. You built your kingdom on sand, and now it's learning to drown you." Outside the room, The hallway felt colder. I passed executives avoiding eye contact, interns packing up desk plants, engineers whispering like survivors of an invisible war. I was no longer just that girl from back end. I was the earthquake. But I hadn't felt the aftershock yet, not until I got the email. Subject: Urgent security concern from IT at Zephyr Cloud. Body: Melissa, a breach has been detected in your former company account. A script flagged suspicious outbound data activity linked to your credentials. We're investigating. May be contacted by authorities. There it was, Margaret's parting gift. A shadow war. And the first strike had just landed. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was scared. Not exactly. But because I knew what that email meant. It wasn't a warning. It was a threat wrapped in corporate HR language, but venomous all the same. Margaret wasn't going to sue me, no. She was going to dirty me, ruin me by implication, make it look like I'd siphoned code, exported data, violated compliance. Make the narrative: woman gets bitter, gets sloppy, gets caught. The oldest play in the book. So I called Ethan. Didn't even wait for business hours, just hit dial while pacing my kitchen barefoot, staring at the half-eaten takeout I suddenly couldn't stomach. He picked up on the third ring. Tell me you didn't do what I think they're accusing you of. I didn't blink. No, but they're manufacturing a trail. Pause. Then, we go nuclear, he said. By noon, Cloudbreak's legal team had subpoenaed Zephyr's internal audit logs, claiming breach of whistleblower protections under federal employment law. They also filed an injunction against Zephyr for attempted retaliation and defamation. But Margaret had already moved. By 2:00 p.m., anonymous Reddit threads started popping up in RR technology and RR startups. Questions, whispers about a rogue dev who'd weaponized telemetry, stolen proprietary algorithms, blackmailed the C-suite. They used the phrase unstable genius. There was even a grainy photo of me from 5 years ago, eyes red, hair a mess, pacing the hallway after a 48-hour deployment crash, captioned, "This is who they trusted." And the worst part? People ate it up, because it's easier to believe the woman burned it all down out of spite than to admit the men in charge never built it right to begin with. The next day, I got a call from someone I hadn't spoken to in years. Danica. We shared a dorm wall at MIT. She went into cybersecurity while I buried myself in algorithms. Last I heard, she was with a private forensics firm that took on messy corporate espionage cases. Her first words were, "Tell me what you really did, Melissa, and tell me now, because your name just landed in the upper-level logs of 3 federal watch lists." I told her everything, line by line, packet by packet, from the debug module to the heartbeat server, from Brandon's laugh to Margaret's offer to bury me. She listened, didn't speak for a full 2 minutes, then said, "You're not paranoid. They're building a case, not because it's true, but because it's believable." Then her voice lowered. "But I can help." She walked me through how to pull the receipts on their receipts. See, Zephyr had exported data from my machine, but not to me. Staged a push to a sandbox environment, then backdated the logs to make it look like I had done it. And thanks to one timestamp glitch, one forgotten time zone mismatch in the file's Margaret data, I could prove it. Danica helped me trace it, package it, digitally notarize every byte. By Friday, we'd compiled a 300-page counter dossier. Ethan's lawyer sent it straight to the board of directors. No press this time, no theatrics, just facts, legal, cold, and surgically sharp. And by Monday, Margaret Dane was gone. Resigned for personal reasons, which we all know is Silicon Valley for the guillotine dropped while the champagne was chilling. But this wasn't over. Because while Margaret vanished from LinkedIn and the Reddit rumors began to rot under the weight of facts, a new name popped up in my inbox. Investor Relations, confidential acquisition offer. And the buyer? Not Cloudbreak, not Zephyr. Someone else entirely. A ghost I hadn't heard from in years, and they didn't want my code. They wanted me. The name in the email made my stomach twist like bad sushi. Dorian Chen. Back in the early days, before Zephyr, before the sleepless nights and stolen credit, Dorian was the one person who almost beat me at the Ascend hackathon. Not with better code, but with better strategy. While I was optimizing algorithms like a monk on Adderall, he was pitching his half-baked prototype to angel investors in the lobby. By the end of the weekend, I had a perfect engine and no job offers. He had 4 venture dinners and a convertible Tesla. We hadn't spoken since, until now. His message was short. Melissa, I followed the Cloudbreak play. Brutal, elegant, classic. You. Let's talk. There's a table with your name on it and no Brandons in sight. I stared at the screen for 5 full minutes. Felt like deja vu with sharper teeth. Dorian was now CTO at NovaQuint, an AI firm that recently swallowed up 3 edge computing startups and made headlines with its post-cloud infrastructure theory. In short, they were hungry. And with Zephyr bleeding out and Cloudbreak gorged, Dorian saw the next move before anyone else even knew they were on the board. I didn't reply right away. I didn't trust him, but I was curious, and curiosity, better or worse, has always been my drug. We met 2 days later in a private room above a Japanese whiskey bar in Palo Alto. He wore a muted hoodie over a $400 haircut and greeted me like we just stepped out of undergrad. Melissa Hayes, he said, offering a glass. Still setting fires with a keyboard, I see. I ignored the charm offensive and asked, What do you want? He didn't blink. You. Then leaned back and explained his pitch. Zephyr's dead weight. Cloudbreak's going to bloat. They're not built to scale what you built, just to buy time. But you, Melissa, you're not a feature. You're infrastructure. You're the next architecture. He laid out an offer that was both obscene and surgically tempting. CTO of a new Skunkworks division, autonomy over team, roadmap, and implementation, equity larger than the market cap of most Series B startups, and most importantly, ownership. My name on everything. No backroom deals, no Brandons, no Margarets. It was everything I wanted, everything I deserved. But something felt off. Too smooth. Too rehearsed. So I asked the only question that mattered. Why now? And his answer chilled me. Because you've proven you're dangerous. And dangerous people are only assets or threats. I'd rather you be the former. That night, I didn't sleep again. Because it hit me. They all wanted the same thing. My brain. My code. My power. But none of them really saw me. Not the woman who broke quietly in conference rooms. Not the girl who filed patents in secret while eating noodles off paper towels. Not the human being behind the architecture they all wanted to exploit or contain. They didn't want a partner. They wanted a weapon. And I was done being pointed. It was time to build my own kingdom. And this time, no one would laugh. I turned down Dorian's offer the next morning. No theatrics, no scorched earth. Just a single sentence. I'm not building someone else's empire again. His reply was instant. Shame. I liked the idea of being on the same side for once. But be careful out there, Melissa. The world doesn't like free radicals. He wasn't wrong. 3 days later, my inbox was flooded with veiled consulting proposals from firms I'd never applied to. They all sounded the same. Vague titles, 7-figure projections, strings so long you could play cat's cradle with them. Every one of them a leash. I deleted them all. Instead, I opened a blank document. Just me, a black screen, and the flicker of a blinking cursor. Line 1. New World boot sequence initiated. MH. Then I started building. No investors, no middlemen, no smug CTOs mistaking my silence for submission. I called it Mirror because every algorithm would reflect the values I was denied: attribution, transparency, equity in design. I coded like I was exercising every ghost that ever whispered, "You're lucky to be here." Wrote every module with the kind of fury that isn't loud, but atomic. And then I released the beta, open source, under my real name. No gatekeeping, no NDAs, no glass ceilings. Within 72 hours, it hit #1 on GitHub trending. By the end of the week, 3 universities had emailed asking to build curriculum around it. Engineers who'd once ignored me in conference calls were tagging me in posts, begging to contribute. Even Brett from the old team sent a DM. "This is what we should have built from the start." "I'm sorry." I didn't reply. Didn't need to. Because somewhere out there, I knew Brandon was watching, from whatever startup cave he'd crawled into, watching his empire crumble in the rear view as the thing he thought he owned evolved without him. And Margaret? She'd resurface eventually. They always do. Probably on some advisory board, peddling resilience at women in tech panels. I hope she chokes on her own buzzwords. As for me, I still don't have an assistant. Still drink gas station coffee. Still write code at 2 a.m. with my hair in a bun and 3 tabs open about Kubernetes I'll never actually read. But now I own every damn keystroke. And if the industry ever dares to forget again, I'll remind them with silence and a tsunami.